My name's Verk. Welcome to Tales from My Table. In today's episode, I want to talk about thievery and why it's awesome. In most of my episodes so far, I've talked about things that have happened inside of my game. In this one, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about things that I have stolen from other games and put them inside of D&D or whatever other game I'm playing. Because although I've only talked mostly about D&D, I actually play a lot of games. I run things like Savage Worlds, Monster of the Week, Masks, Dragon Age, older versions of D&D. I feel like there's so many games out there that can contribute to the conversation of role-playing games. And it doesn't have to be wholesale. If you really love Powered by the Apocalypse games, or you really love Savage Worlds, but you think that this cool mechanic thing over in this other game is really awesome, just take it. It's what I've done. Matter of fact, that's kind of the point of the video. I want to talk about the things that I've taken from other games, and why and how I've used them, and why I like them. First and foremost, let's talk about Savage Worlds Deluxe Edition, because I haven't actually read Adventures Edition yet, but I will. In Savage Worlds, there's this thing called Bennies, and it's kind of like Inspiration from D&D 5e, but a little bit different. It lets you do really powerful things like slough off wounds, or change conditions on your character, or let you reroll dice, and you can have a lot of them. The DM can give you for something for almost anything. That idea is so cool to me. Like the idea of giving someone a token and being like, here you go, here's this token, this gives you a little bit of narrative control in the system. Like, that's cool. And you know, when I give my players them, I give them for all sorts of things. I mean, it can be like, hey, you made me laugh, here's a Benny. Or it could be something more like, oh, that was a really great RPing moment, here, take a Benny. Or, that was awesome, you didn't metagame there even though you could have, here's a Benny. And it encourages good behavior, and it gives them power. And I let my players do all sorts of stuff with their bennies, like if you want to reroll a roll, if you want to automatically succeed at a certain kind of check, if you want there to be a chandelier overhead, give me that benny, we'll make it happen. In one game, I had players that went in to go fight a banshee, and they had done all this prep work and stuff and trying to figure it out, and they got this wax that they were going to put in their ears before the fight, and so to help with the howl, right? So what did they do? They just went right in, totally forgot about putting the wax in their ear. It was kind of funny. But one of the players goes, so if I give you my Benny, can I have put in my earwax? And I was like, heck yes you can. So it was a cool like resource that they could use to do something that they forgot in character, out of character or whatever, and it worked out really well. I really liked it. So yeah, I put bennies in everything. One of the other mechanics I've taken is from D&D 4e. Widely considered the worst version of D&D out there. I think 4e missed the boat on something. I feel like the core of that game had something cool in it, but they got lost in details. And I also love the art of 4th edition. I still use the 4th edition Dungeon Master screen because I love it so much. But the two things that I really took from 4e are, one, skill challenges, and two, the bloody mechanic. Both of these things are awesome. The skill challenges are the concept, for those of you that don't know, is, at least the way it was written originally, I've tweaked it some, but the way it was written originally was the players could pick a skill that they wanted to roll on to try to advance through a problem. So let's say there was a chase scene. We all know how hard chase scenes are to make interesting in a role-playing game. But let's say there's a chase scene. you say to your group, hey, this is a skill challenge. So pick which skills you want to use here to get through it. So the players then have a choice of looking at their skills. They're like, oh, wow, I'm proficient in sleight of hand. I'm proficient in persuasion. I'm proficient in acrobatics. So the player can look at that and go, I know, I'm going to use my acrobatics. So then they tell you exactly how they did it. I run down the street and I parkour off the walls and I go down there and I slide under the apple cart, and you do the thing. So then I'm like, cool, roll that. And so they roll. And then the idea is you have to have a certain amount of successes before you have a certain amount of fails. I use this pretty frequently. Just recently I used it as a giant airship was falling out of the sky, and the players had to do things to try to protect themselves and other people on board, and I used the skill challenge mechanic. And something that hadn't happened before when I had run skill challenges back in 4E was players wanted to use some spells to do it. And once that happened, I was like, well, shoot, if they want to use a spell slot, like one of them was is 5th level spell or something. And I was like, well, if they're going to use a spell slot, that should be automatic success. I think I did that right. But anyway, so it was a really great thing because it makes players think of different ways to deal with the situation. Where 4E kind of fell short on this was it didn't have a lot of good explanation of what to do if the characters failed their test, their skill challenge, right? What I've ended up doing is they still usually succeed, but if they fail, it's coming at a cost, there's a problem with it, it takes a super long time, whatever the situation is. But to make sure that the story keeps going without there being like a block wall that they're like slamming into, right? So that was one of the few things I've changed. Also the spell thing that I talked about. The other mechanic I stole from 4E was bloodied. So the idea of bloodied in 4E was interesting because a monster, when it got to half of its health points, you would tell the players, hey, this is bloodied. There's a neat mechanic where you flipped over tokens in the monster vault too, which was kind of fun, but anyway. But yeah, so once it got to about 50%, they were bloodied. And you tell the players and they know, oh, hey, I hit halfway point on their health. But the interesting part was a lot of monsters had a whole second set of skills or attacks or whatever once they hit halfway. So they'd be fighting this dragon, and the dragon was, out of its fire breath and it couldn't fly or whatever happened. All of a sudden you hit 50%, the thing takes off in the air and instantly recharges its fire breath, or it can now spit globules of fire at you, or whatever the situation. Like it was a whole different stage of the combat, which was super cool. I loved that. So I've kind of taken that and moved that into my game. I don't do it with small monsters, but I sure as hell do it with big things with big hit points. And it does two things. It makes combat interesting because who knows what's going to happen when they hit halfway. And two, also it gives the players an idea of, oh, hey, we hit the halfway point on this huge health pool monster, right? And so they know that they're doing something. They're making effectual combat. And I like that. I think that's cool. Speaking of D&D, the thing that I steal from D&D 5 is advantage, disadvantage. Advantage, disadvantage is the most elegant system for giving pluses and minuses without all the math. It was truly a masterpiece of 5th edition. I think if you distill all the 5th edition down to one thing, I think advantage, disadvantage would probably be the shining star and the quintessential mechanic that they came up with. When you look back at 3.5 or Pathfinder or any of these things, there were so many positives, negatives, ones, -1, positive 1, whatever, that slowed down combat in the math. It had these crazy math curves, right? Not that it's hard, right? Like, we can all do simple math. But it was frustrating because there were so many different things you had to keep in your mind. Now, you do something awesome, you get something really cool, you get advantage. Something bad happens, disadvantage. Like, it's awesome. Roll 2 dice, pick the highest. Perfect mechanic. So I've taken that and I put in a lot of other stuff. I put it in Savage Worlds, where under very certain circumstances, they can roll a second wild dice and pick the highest of the 2 wild dice. I've put it in Dragon Age, letting people use a whole nother dragon dice and just pick the highest of the 2 dragon dice. I've also used it in Powers by the Apocalypse games, right, where it's only 2d6. Roll that third d6 and pick the 2 highest of those and add those together. And turns out I wasn't the only person that thought of that. Jason Mills over at Happy Jacks, he is writing a whole nother Powered by Apocalypse game called Demigods. And he took that mechanic of advantage, disadvantage, and stuck it in Powered by Apocalypse game. And it's brilliant. I think it's hysterical that something that I had thought of, he had thought of completely independently of himself and started doing it. And he did all the math and stuff and figured it out that it worked and all that kind of stuff, which is even better than what I did. So, rock on Jason Mills. If you get a chance, check out Demigods, by the way. I think it's hitting Kickstarter sometime summer 2019. Speaking of Powered by the Apocalypse games, or PBTA as they're called, I have stolen a lot from Powered by the Apocalypse. Not as many mechanics, per se, although I have stolen a few, but more of what I've taken is the thought process of Powered by the Apocalypse. I've taken things that Powered by the Apocalypse talks about, but maybe they didn't invent it, right? Failing forward, succeeding with a cost, playing to find out. These are actually really big staples, I think, in DMing in general. And Powered by the Apocalypse did a great job of putting those into a small package that we all can read and understand. But the things that I have taken more mechanically from PBTA is specifically from games like Monster of the Week and Mass the Next Generation, and even to a certain extent Monster Hearts, where they have these things like backstories or connections or bonds, I think they're called. And what they are is they are specific questions to your character written on your character sheet, or playbook as they're called. And it'll say something like, this hunter knows about your criminal past. Tell them what crimes they saw you commit. That is a hugely loaded question with implications and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's a super evocative question that you are going to read that you're going to then use to connect to one of the other players at the table. And all of the playbooks have multiple of those questions on them. So it's an easy thing to stick into any role-playing game as a good way of making connection with players. Because, in my opinion, there's not much worse than when your players don't trust another character, or there's this constant like infighting between people, or there's that like, well, why am I even on this adventure with him? Drives me nuts. But the other thing that I think is even better than those questions is in specifically Masks: A New Generation. If you haven't played Masks, you should. It's awesome. Go buy it and play it. Teenage superhero drama, so much fun. But in there, they have this thing called How We All Came Together, or How the Team Came Together. Something like that. I don't remember the exact wordings. And it's a list of questions that are like, we saved a city from something bad. What was it? It was just the start of something worse. What did we find out? We broke something super important to the city. What was it? And so you can take those questions, tweak them just a little bit, and use those in any setting, any game you're playing, anything at all. Go through those questions as a group, and you have a whole backstory for your group, your adventuring party, your superhero team, your whatever. And now you guys have this bond of why you're together, what you're doing together, cool backstory villains that have come out of it, all these neat things that will help progress the game as you go. It's awesome. I will never, ever play another RPG without doing that first. I think that's all I have to say about that. That's what I've stolen from games. What have you stolen? What are those things that you found in other systems that you steal wholesale and stick into your game? What what thing do you love about other role-playing games that you make work in your group? Tell me down below in the comments. I really want to hear it. I want to have a conversation open. Let's talk about it. Also down below, you'll find my links to Twitch. I try to stream in the morning, old school RPGs, stuff like NetHack and Fallout 1 and all that kind of stuff. So come join. You'll see the information down below. So again, I'm Verk. Thanks for watching.